Your mind is my secret lover. You're my man crush, Donald Glover.
Hello. So basically, nothing in the world is more fascinating to me than the career of this man. This isn't him. This isn't even the right album that I'm talking about today. But anyways, I respect Donald Glover more than anyone else on the planet. I love everything he does, and his latest project, it confused a lot of people. So that is what I'm going to be discussing today. So grab yourself a snack to enjoy while watching this video because you are what you eat. Maybe also grab a notebook and pencil. You might want to take notes. So let's start this off with a history lesson. Prior to the release of 3:15:20, Donald Glover had already released 3 official studio albums: Camp, Because the Internet, and Awaken My Love. And that last one was released in December of 2016. So before the release of 3:15:20, it had been over 3 years since the release of his last album. And sometime in 2017, he declared during a live show that he would be making just one more album as Childish Gambino.
I'll see you for the last Gambino album.
This single quote was the spark that quickly spread like wildfire throughout his fan base, causing every major fan to theorize about what the next album would be called, how it would sound, when it would drop, and whether or not it would tie in with any of his previous works. Now, during the years after album number 3's release, he continued to do live shows, and thanks to people who sit and record concerts instead of actually enjoying them in the moment, we, as in the members of his online fan community, were able to hear songs like Human Sacrifice, Algorithm, Atavista, and more. These songs were all completely unfamiliar to fans, having no official studio recorded versions available to stream. The fact that he was performing so much new music caused everyone to believe something was coming relatively soon. 2018 was a huge year for Donald Glover in every area of his career, with season 2 of his critically acclaimed FX series Atlanta premiering in March of that year, also with him playing a young Lando for one of the biggest film franchises of all time. And he had one of his biggest dreams come true when he hosted Saturday Night Live, where he also premiered a little song known as This Is America, having the music video for that song released on YouTube at the same time he was hosting. That's a power move if I've ever seen one. During July of that same year, he dropped the Summer Pack, which included 2 songs, Summertime Magic and Feels Like Summer. That second one was also given a music video just a couple months later. Needless to say, 2018 was the Donald Glover moment, and with all these music videos and songs being released, there was a lot of speculation that his supposedly final album was coming very soon. But it wasn't. Although, you know what did happen at the end of 2018? Like, the very end of that year?
Gotta tell the whole world your hottie was Da Vinci.
But that's not what we're here to talk about. However, if you're watching this because that Instagram account told you to, I love you. In early 2019, Donald posted a short snippet from a Google Pixel ad that he would be featured in, which we later saw in its entirety during the Grammys that year. The ad featured the song Human Sacrifice, which fans immediately recognized from his live performances. This gave us all hope that a studio version of the absolute banger was soon to be released. But once again, it wasn't, and even now, it's still not looking good for those of us who like that song. Which, by the way, does anybody know how that song was named? Like, cause Human Sacrifice, that term isn't anywhere in the lyrics, so did the world just like silently agree that that was the title, or like, I missed something. Just a few months after that commercial debuted, Mr. Gambino headlined Coachella, also premiering his film Guava Island on Amazon Prime that first weekend. Again, another power move. And can I just say, that night, Coachella's YouTube channel live streamed his entire performance, and I was sitting there in my mom's basement watching it from my laptop, and the serotonin levels were just through the roof. By the way, if you would like to watch that Coachella performance, I screen recorded the entire thing as it was airing, and I put it up on a Google Drive. So if you want to watch it, just DM me on Instagram and I'll send you the link. And don't even get me started on Guava Island. Guava Island debuted several new songs and featured some familiar tunes, which created an incredible experience for any fans of Glover's previous works. But it was those unfamiliar jams that relit the flame of speculation within the fandom. Still, no Childish Gambino album was released during that year, nor were any new streamable songs. With that being said, let's talk about what is probably the most fascinating part of this whole thing, which is, of course, the number. If you've been a part of his fanbase for any amount of time, you know which number I'm talking about, and it's not 3005. There were many Childish Gambino live shows throughout 2017 to 2019, and one thing that several concert goers noticed at these shows was the frequent appearance of the number 28, which seemed to be scattered throughout the areas that the concerts were being held. It became kind of a trend for hardcore fans to post pictures of every 28 sighting, and sure enough, this caused speculation because nobody overthinks quite like the average Gambino stan. The mass overthinking led to the popular belief that the supposedly final album would be dropping on the 28th day of the month, but it was unsure which month that would be. I remember telling my friend whose birthday is on December 28th, I was like, dude, I think, like, don't tell anybody, but I think Mr. Gambino is gonna drop an album on your birthday. He didn't, but honestly, every 28th day since this started happening, I've gotten my hopes up every time, and that's really stuck with me, unfortunately. Like, shout out to Donald Glover for taking my brain and programming it into getting a little shred of hope every time the number 28 appears in my life. Even to this day, I'll check the time, it'll be like 4:28 p.m. or something, and my brain goes, So I'm in the middle of editing this part and I checked the time and I shit you not. Is that PTSD? I think Donald Glover might have given me like a small, incredibly minor case of PTSD. The album was never released on the 28th day of any month, but instead was dropped on the 15th day of March 2020, which you may remember as the month a global pandemic spread across the world almost as fast as the theories about 28 spread within the Gambino fandom. This number, however, is not completely insignificant. There are several different interpretations of the number 28, but the most interesting and relevant to this conversation that I came across while doing research for this video was that the appearance of this number indicates that some old cycle is about to end and a new one is about to begin. I actually do encourage you to look up what this number means for yourself, because there's a few different meanings depending on what you read, and this one in particular just kind of blew me away. Like, let me show you this clip.
I believe in endings. I don't think, like, people really scared of death. I am not afraid of that shit. That's part of life. That's part of everything.
There's actually a few different interviews where he says something similar to this, but I'm not going to bother going to find every single one. You get the point. So one would think that the end to such a beloved discography would be something that just absolutely took the breath of the biggest fans away, that its release would be something the artist himself would tease and talk about in the days, weeks, even months leading up to its debut. Something that we'd be counting down. Yeah, he streamed the entire thing for half a day, took it down, didn't say anything about it. And still hasn't. The website was called DonaldGloverPresents.com and was really only brought to light by the fact that his fan base is actually insane. There was no previous indication of this whatsoever, but when the world needed him most, he appeared. Because the week this happened would have been the first or second week of quarantine for a lot of people around the world, and the vast majority of individuals stuck at home during that time quickly grew bored while also being worried about the future textbook chapter they were experiencing. I know for me personally, I was just lying in bed that Sunday morning, just feeling like so hopeless about everything that was going on. And then I did what I always do and looked at my phone to make that feeling even worse. But then I opened up Instagram and I had over 40 messages that morning from people just asking what this was. People were sending me the link, so I clicked on it. This website had just like appeared out of nowhere, and when you went to it, when you clicked on the link, it was just a blank screen and it had this little illustration in the center of it. When looked at more closely, the illustration is divided into 4 different sections, which has caused some people to believe that the music released on this day was only 1/4 of the full project. It shows numerous people, some who look horrified and some who look completely fine, crowding in front of these burning buildings. Notice how the flames and the people are both drawn in a darker shade than the buildings, indicating that the chaos is within the people themselves rather than the world that they live in. This image was accompanied on the website by some audio, which what we didn't know at the time was actually the entire album being streamed on a continuous loop. I was still like half asleep while witnessing this for the first time, so I just sat there listening and screen recording. I tend to do that a lot. And I could tell it was his voice, but the overall sound of it was just so different from anything he'd done before, which was not really surprising. I don't know what timestamp I was on at the time I started listening, but the first thing I heard that sounded familiar at all was Warlords or 3222, which he had performed at Coachella in a really unique, bizarre way. And I recognized a few other songs after that, but the one thing you notice, compared to his other work, it's very auto-tuned. Like, this is definitely, I think, the most alteration he's done to his own voice, if that makes sense. And honestly, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to like the lyrics or anything at first. I was just kind of too busy like ascending. When it circled back around to Algorithm, I recognized it right away because he performed that at Coachella and a bunch of other shows before that. It sounded so different. Like, it was really odd listening to the studio version of that song, because at his live shows he almost like shouts it like he's just using his natural voice, but it's super like low and auto-tuned on the album, which is really interesting, and I still like it. It's still a jam. And then obviously after a while I started to realize that it was just that one piece of audio on a continuous loop, so I left the website for a little bit. I messaged everybody I know personally, forced them to go to that website because that was the only place you could listen to it at the time. It wasn't available on any streaming platforms yet, and you know, I just went about my day absolutely enjoying it because I knew that me and the community had just been blessed. After about half the day had gone by, the audio stopped, and you might be able to guess what happened when the Gambino stans found out. You know that iconic soul scream thing he does, especially on Awaken My Love? Yeah, that's what that entire week after that day felt like, but that's not a bad thing. Like, yeah, we were all super confused and like not sure if we were ever gonna hear that again, aside from me because I screen recorded it. If anything, that huge like wave of chaos just kind of brought us all closer together. And Donald, like, I know he's not watching this, he has far better things to be doing with his time, but we've all seen that tweet like thing that says he lurks around on social media. I think this man knows his fan base well enough to know that we would gladly advertise anything for him, which is actually so smart because Because like, why waste money on a whole ad campaign for your project when your sleep-deprived fans can just do it for you? And that is exactly what the Gambino stans did. In fact, exactly a week after the 15th of March, so the 22nd of March 2020, the music became available to stream on all platforms. You can even listen to it for free here on YouTube. And the continuous loop had returned to the website for a short time. But instead of being accompanied by the illustration, there were instead some pictures of a journal which we can assume contains Mr. Gambino's writing. Feel free to pause and read what the pages say before I move on. Gambino trended on Twitter that day without any word from the man himself. The conversation was led entirely by fans and general audiences, mostly out of confusion. The project seemed non-existent in a way, with no cover art, no song titles, and the album itself didn't even have a title. The concept of dropping a surprise album is nothing new. In fact, it was popularized by Beyonce, who we'll talk about a little more later. So that's nothing audience haven't heard of before. It's just the pure lack of visuals and overall chaotic nature of this thing that made people so hesitant to accept it. So that's the general history of 3/15/20 summed up, and it only took however long you've been watching this for. But now we're finally gonna get into the thing you probably clicked on this video to hear about, which is what it means. You should take a moment here to just pause the video and breathe before we move on. You know how at the beginning of this video I said that you are what you eat? Yeah, go get yourself a whole meal, because if you made it this far, it's what you deserve. And because you're gonna need the energy for the rest of this mess. So what does 3/15/20 mean? I don't know. And I'm not just saying that because it's 3 a.m. I'm saying that because I was not involved in the making of this. I'm not Donald Glover, in case you couldn't tell. It's not my art, and the creator of this art has not directly stated what his intentions were with it. So I don't know, but what I do know is that as a piece of art, it is meant to be interpreted by different people in different ways. And I interpret it exactly as that. It's something to be thought about. I think it's very obvious that Mr. Glover wanted people to think about this in different ways instead of just handing out the answer. It's the same thing he did with This Is America. He literally refused to explain that song or video.
Can you explain what's happening at the end of that video?
No. I feel like it's not really my place. I don't want to give it any context.
Also, I found this clip of him being asked what Roscoe's wetsuit means during the Because the Internet era, and he has a very similar response.
Yeah. You guys will see. I can't. It's all part of bigger things too. But like, just remember asking why you want to know, because that's part of it. Why do you know why you want to know? You just want to know? Yeah, right? Okay, cool. Remember that.
This would be a good time to bring up the fact that the song This Is America literally has 2 different visual interpretations made by Mr. Glover himself. The first obviously being the music video, which has to do with gun violence and police brutality, and the second being the scene in Guava Island where he starts singing it to his coworker.
We just want to party just for you.
And in this version, the song relates more to capitalism, and that being the basis of American culture.
America is a concept. Anywhere where in order to get rich, you have to make someone else richer is America.
Same song, same lyrics, different context. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I want you to understand the importance of visuals, which 3/15/20 lacks entirely, aside from those 2 things we talked about earlier. Take this compared to Beyonce's Black is King, which is a whole film shot in the style of a music video. Artists who create visuals to go along with their music tend to succeed far more than those who don't. I'm not necessarily trying to say that this album wasn't successful, but to me it seemed like people just kind of showed up to say something about it really quick and then left and never spoke of it again. And I feel like a lot of the discussion was very negative, and I think that is in large part due to the fact that Human Sacrifice and Saturday, which are like his 2 most popular unreleased songs, were not part of this album. Like, I saw some people getting genuinely upset by this, which I do not understand why. Go to the YouTube search bar right now, type in the titles of those songs, Saturday and Human Sacrifice, and you will find not studio recorded versions, but you can still listen to them. It's not like he just deleted them from existence, you know? Like, it's really not that hard. But back to interpretations. I asked the people of the Instagram Gambino community how they interpreted the album, which I don't even know if I should be referring to it as an album at this point, but more on that in a bit. You can go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read these responses from fellow fans. A lot of people were saying that they think he created this entire album as a response to the current world events, which I think is obvious when you listen to the lyrics, but I don't think this is something he put together just for the mess that is 2020. If you were paying attention to the history lesson that is the first half of this video, you'll recall that the project was released pretty early on into quarantine, so I don't think he would have been able to come up with this entire concept in that amount of time. Of course, some of these songs were ones that we had already heard, and again, feels like Summer had already been released on the Summer Pack in 2018. So a good amount of the content on 3:15:20 was likely completed much earlier than the rest, but that still leaves a lot of music on here that had never been heard before. So I'll tell you what I think. I think that this is probably something he had come up with and completed quite some time ago, maybe sometime last year after he finished touring, and was just waiting to release it for an event like this. Now, I'm not saying he knew the pandemic was going to happen, but with all of the problems going on in the world anyways, there was bound to be one thing that affected the entire world at once eventually, and this is a project that embodies chaos, but in the end makes you feel like things are going to be okay. In the lyrics, we hear about the violence, but we're also told not to worry about tomorrow. Using Feels Like Summer as an example, it's a very mellow sounding song, but when you pay attention to the lyrics, it talks about how everything is becoming much more fast-paced in the world, and even addresses the fact that the earth is heating up, which is something that causes a lot of anxiety. Yet the song has such a calming vibe to it, and I hope you'll listen to each song this way and think about what the lyrics are trying to convey versus what the feeling of the sound itself gives off. Another thing I saw somebody mention was that it might have been forced by his record label, and that's always a possibility just because it had been over 3 years since his last album. But one thing that I definitely think was caused by his label was the fact that Time and Algorithm were the only 2 songs with names. I feel like if he had been given complete creative control over this, those 2 would also have been timestamps. But you have to remember that his label still needs to profit off of his work. I mean, they don't need to, but they're a record label, that's their main focus. And it's hard to profit off of a piece of art that seems so non-existent from a marketing standpoint. Also, remember that thing I said about how visuals are important to success in the music industry? I feel like audiences today are more comfortable or more used to, I guess, interpreting art in a visual format than anything else. Like, I don't think, actually I know for a fact that This Is America would not have been the hit that it ended up being if it weren't for that music video. And that's not to say that it weakens the song in any way, it adds to what you're hearing. And like I said, this song in particular has 2 different visual accompaniments? That's the word. It has 2 different visual accompaniments. Each one takes its own spin on the same song with the same lyrics, but in different contexts. So why did Donald Glover go from making such visual pieces to making something with no visuals whatsoever? 3:15:20 plays out as one big song running just under an hour and is an experience that relies purely on audio. It's a song that can be listened to again and again depending on how much you enjoy it, but with the timestamps you can still skip to your favorite parts in that song. I just thought of something really interesting, and if you know me personally you're gonna roll your eyes at this because it's all I ever talk about anyways, but you know what this album reminds me of? Now, Hadestown is a Broadway musical that you can get tickets to go see performed live, but the album itself stands on its own. But what it has in common with 3:15:20 is that all of the music, everything included on it, is presented as just one giant song rather than individual standalone pieces. But again, the fact that they're presented in the form of albums allows you to easily skip ahead to your favorite part in that song. And both of these things also deal with themes that make you think of what is essentially the apocalypse, or things that would lead to an apocalypse, such as climate change, capitalism, and losing the sight of individuality. I've also noticed that people tend to dismiss both of these albums pretty quickly after just one listen because they don't get it right away, and I think that's like a huge mistake, because as somebody who has listened to both of these things more times than I care to admit, the process of coming to understand them is an experience that I think everybody should have, because it's seriously something I can't even put into words. But when all you have in a piece of art is the audio, it leaves the rest of the experience up to you. It encourages you to use your imagination, and that's exactly what 3:15:20 is. It's an experience. I see the blankness, if you can call it that, as like an invitation to become part of the creative process, which that's just an idea I could not be more obsessed with.
But I don't want to do albums, especially now. If you're going to put out a body of work, it should be like an experience. I want to make like worlds and stories that people can live in for like years if they wanted to.
Obviously, with the way he released 3:15:20, it's not the same kind of experience you would have as going to a live show or watching a movie or anything like that. But that chaotic week in between those 2 Sundays of the release, that is something I will have in my memory forever because of just how wild it was. It was unlike anything that I've ever experienced. Like, I'll never get to relive that, and I almost kind of wish I could go back just to feel that again, because it was such a weird feeling, and again, I know I'll never feel like that again. The timing, again, was perfect. It was just an overwhelming sea of confusion, and it was magical. So, let's say, hypothetically, this is the last Gambino album ever. Some have said that because it's presented as Donald Glover Presents 3:15:20, that this doesn't count as a Childish Gambino album, and that there will be more. I'm not sure, again, that's just kind of a theory. But even if this is the last Childish Gambino project that we ever witness, I would honestly be fine with that, because I know that I can still go back and listen to everything he's done. And I know that every person I introduce to his work from now on is going to get to enjoy everything he's done up to this point. So that's more than I could ever ask for, honestly. He's just created so much good work that I seriously, I don't feel comfortable like asking or like complaining that if he wouldn't put out anything else. Do you know what I mean? Like, I hope that makes sense. So Childish Gambino might have come to an end. And is that sad? Sure, but it's a sadness he chose. I feel like I'm teaching a college course on Donald Glover's career, but if that's the case, please know that this is only like a small chapter of that. Like, I didn't even get into all the religious metaphors that he uses in his music. Like, a bunch of people accuse me of like celebrity worship because I have my account as a religious organization, but that's just kind of something I did based off of the fact that he weaves in all these religious metaphors throughout his own music. But more on that another day. A few things before I go though. To close this lecture off, as somebody who lives and breathes this man's music, there were a few details in 31520 that made me just absolutely... First off, the fact that his kids got to be a part of it.
Do you love yourself?
I do love myself.
The fact that he says he loves himself twice.
Never said it even though I probably should. I said I love me. I said I love me.
Especially when you look back on some of the stuff he used to say.
I'm probably the most insecure person I know.
Sometimes I wake up and I don't want to be here.
And just overall, like, all the character development you can sense.
Alone is exactly how I should be. When you feel alone, no, you are not alone.
And I almost forgot my favorite part. The only mention of the number 28 on the entire thing is in a line about eating ass.
25 out of 28, that ass.
What? That dude gets it.
I'll leave the rest of those responses here, and I highly recommend you read them because it's important that we all look at things from different points of view, and it's good for your mind to explore new ideas. That's what art is about. Obviously, feel free to leave your own ideas in the comments, leave constructive criticism for everything you just watched. I would really appreciate that. If you're one of those people who just wants to tell everybody else that their taste in music is inferior to yours, I promise you no one cares. I mean, you can still comment, like, what am I gonna do, chase you? I'm unemployed, so I'll still read them all, but I just thought I would save you the time and effort by telling you that we don't care. I would also like to say that it's perfectly fine to decide whether or not you like a piece of art based just on how it looks or sounds without getting into this deeper meaning of each piece. There's nothing wrong with appreciating art for superficial reasons, so maybe you just didn't like this album because you just don't like the sound of it, and that's completely fine. It might be the same reason you don't want to buy a painting because it just doesn't match your aesthetic. But with all that out of the way, I just want to say thank you for watching this entire thing. If you did, you should also listen to Hadestown because you clearly have the time. I really have nothing else to say other than I appreciate you for watching this.
I just wanna say thank you.
And I probably will be making more videos like this in the future, just on different projects that he's done, because it's actually really therapeutic for me and I like it, so if other people like it, then I'll keep doing it. You can follow me at Drop It Like the Nasdaq on Instagram or on my personal account if you would like. But yeah, that's all for now, so bye!
Without you, the name Donald would be the most hated name in America. There is still a chance people name their kid Donald solely because of you.
I just got done editing that entire video and I realized that I forgot to talk about like the blank white square cover, and I feel like people are going to be mad at me for that. So instead of getting mad, let's just turn it into an Instagram challenge where we all go around looking for stuff that looks like the 31520 cover. I'll start my shirt, this bathtub, this paint, my complexion, the wall behind this Donald Glover tapestry, and tissues.